Hi everyone, it's Nick Marzano and this is Local Nation. I'm back after a little hiatus. Did this thing called getting married, followed by this other thing called a honeymoon, followed by this other thing called some health stuff I won't really get into. Point is, I had a lot going on, but now I'm back and I'm really excited about the episodes I have coming together for you. You know, when I started this podcast, I did not plan to run it in seasons. But after living it for a few months, I think that's the best way for me to bring some consistency to the show without sacrificing quality. I put a lot of time and effort into these episodes, especially the primers. I hope that comes through. For each primer episode, before I even put pen to paper, I typically end up reading one or two historical or contemporary books and steep myself in around 30 to 40 white papers, journal articles, and news stories. For the district attorney and risk assessment shows, I even sought out a few DAs and public defenders to check my work. See, in between the bad puns and nerding out, I feel like if you're listening, you've automatically put some trust in me. And that means I have an obligation to get the facts right and to know enough at least to present a fair picture of the current context of an office or an aspect of local government. Even if you don't agree with a concept or a program discussed on the show, I hope that context helps you set up your rebuttal so you can argue for a better way of doing things. I want you to know that I take that responsibility really seriously. So consider this the launch of Season 2, or whatever. Between now and September, I'll be putting together 6 more shows, starting with this interview episode and an upcoming primer on state legislatures. I'm really looking forward to saying state legislatures several times during that show. Without further ado, here's Season 2. Often, city administration is about meeting basic needs on an enormous scale, bringing drinkable water to every building, managing sewers, fixing potholes, coming up with a fair system for the 800 families who all want to barbecue in the same park on the 4th of July. And of course, picking up loads and loads of your trash. As a special bonus, cities get to deal with the inevitable side effect of trash pickup, litter. My neighborhood in Philly has a bit of a litter problem, in fact. Actually, a lot of neighborhoods around here do, and that's common in many big American cities. But recently, Philadelphia has also earned a reputation for having one of the country's most comprehensive, coordinated, and ambitious efforts to address its trash problem. It's called the Zero Waste and Litter Action Plan. On today's episode, I talk with 2 key members of the team responsible for implementing that plan, the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet. Truly, these are Philly's literati. Get it? Because litter? Yeah, well. You'll hear from Nick Esposito, who is director of this cabinet, and you'll hear from Michelle Feldman, a member of the cabinet who also serves as executive director for Keep Philadelphia Beautiful. You'll hear us discuss some of the basic challenges of any large-scale metro waste management program and how it's evolved since the days horses just went anywhere, and I mean went anywhere. But we also talk about why the current approach isn't sustainable for that much longer and why Philly's action plan stands out as cities around the country move to adopt similar zero waste principles. Now, I should say in full disclosure, I sit on the board of Keep Philadelphia Beautiful, and Michelle and I have been friends for a while. But as it happens, she also has a lot of experience and expertise in this area, which is, why she was asked to sit on the cabinet in the first place. Okay, enough of this garbage intro. Let's talk trash. Michelle and Nick, thanks for joining me today to talk a little bit about your work with waste and litter, to do a little trash talk here today. Just give us a brief intro into what the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet is.
So when Mayor Kenny and then my boss, Mike DeBaradinis, the managing director of the city, got together and we're thinking about, how can we approach this problem? They didn't look at it as 2 separate things, waste and litter. They looked at it as one piece and kind of a system that needed to kind of work together. If we can upgrade our waste management practices and get them into the 21st century, we're going to improve the litter situation in Philadelphia, but we're not going to get people to buy into wanting to improve that system if the litter conditions don't change in the city. So they wanted to create something that kind of worked in tandem, and that's why it's the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet working on both issues, not setting this aspirational goal for zero waste by 2035, really trying to clean the city up now as we improve our situation. So the cabinet and the executive order brought together stakeholders and department heads from all the operating departments in the city and many other partners, Keep Philadelphia Beautiful being one of them, to come up with a comprehensive action plan to make headway on this issue, which we did. We formed the Zero Waste and Litter Action Plan in 2017, came out in the summer, and now we're just kind of clicking through it. I'm the director of the cabinet, so my job really is, call it the best community organizing job I could ever ask for. I really just work to keep all of the cabinet stakeholders and all of their staff at the table, sitting around, kind of out of their silos, all working together to really kind of make this plan come alive. And if we can be successful in everything that's in that plan, I think we're going to be living in a very clean, progressive waste city in the future.
Well, and just having that cabinet sounds like a very unique thing for any city cutting through those silos. So we'll definitely come back to that. Michelle, do you want to tell us a bit about Keep Philadelphia Beautiful?
Sure. I always like to joke that we do sort of exactly what it sounds like. We do a lot of education and outreach, primarily around recycling education and promotion, waste reduction, and litter abatement and prevention. So we were founded by the city of Philadelphia in 1985, and we've had a lot of iterations since then. But in terms of our actual day-to-day programming, we have about 3.5 tracks. One being education in general, so environmental education in schools. I also always say that we do civic education. So we try to help folks, both residents and community groups on the ground, to navigate city departments and programs as well as other nonprofit resources, because there are a lot of great initiatives going on in the city, and sometimes it's hard to figure out who does what and how to get to those folks. So we try and demystify that and break that down through workshops, but also through our annual community cleanup resource guide. And then we work with lots of neighborhood-based organizations to try and build capacity on the ground for those civic groups through micro-granting, but primarily through convening. So we work with the Philadelphia Association of CDCs, the Streets Department, and the Commerce Department on bringing together as many neighborhood leaders as we can in a room quarterly. We see that very much as coalition building. Working on collective impact projects is sort of where that's headed in the future, but it has been a lot of best practice sharing. And then in the warmer months, we do cleanup. So we are in the midst of cleanup season right now. So we usually do about 7 or 8 a season. We've tried to theme them and make them education related as well. So the last couple of seasons, we've really been focused on waterway health and the connection between litter and trash management and our waterways.
Well, I want to pull back the frame and talk a little bit about waste management in general, and then we'll get down to the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet and the role that both of you have been playing in that. So over the past couple of decades, garbage disposal and waste management has really become a bread and butter service. For Philly, that translates into a mind-bogglingly huge operation, which is handled by the Streets Department Sanitation Division. They service over 540,000 households. And yet they were on time, according to their budget, 93% of the time in 2017. They're also responsible for street cleaning, some education, and issuing warnings and citations for folks who are out of compliance. So, seems like a simple thing, but one small tweak to the system, I imagine, could make a huge difference to the amount of trash or the way that it's picked up. Do you know how much of that fleet is maintained by the city? How much is contracted?
So basically for the 540,000 households that you mentioned, that is entirely done through the Streets Department. That is not contracted out. We have different laws on the books for different scenarios. So any unit that's over 6 units, if it's a multifamily or an apartment complex, usually requires either you pay a fee and you can have like once a week trash pickup, or you're mostly having commercial pickups that's happening there, and then all the commercial establishments from restaurants to retail stores to manufacturing to larger institutions, they have commercial pickups, so private waste hauling pickups.
And that's a requirement from the city.
That's a state requirement, actually. So we have a state, it's called Act 101, that basically says every municipality has to have something set up for, and private businesses as well, for their waste management. So we write a waste management plan every 10 years that we follow. We just actually got done doing it a couple of years ago. But yeah, it's a mind-boggling thing to have 540,000 households, and I really thank you for putting that statistic of the 93% on time. And you're dealing with all kinds of weather events, life. People call out, like they're human beings who do this work. They're not robots, and they do. Our sanitation workers, especially, one of the most dangerous jobs and one of the hardest jobs in the city, if not the country. So it's a huge lift. And I don't know how you feel about this, Michelle. I just feel like we're kind of living in the time. We're living on the back end of the 20th century. We have trash compactors, or going around the city. Waste management, what a gift, right? You could just put stuff on the curb and someone picks it up and takes it away for you. I feel like it's just so taken for granted at this point now that people just expect it to happen. You just put it out on the curb, it just magically disappears somewhere.
Well, and I think it's sort of like our food system too, where we don't always know or even think about where our food comes from. We go to a grocery store and we buy things and then we dispose of them when we're done with it. And I think it's sort of the same thing with our trash and our recycling each week, where you're so divorced from how it works, and you sort of become divorced from the idea, first of all, that there is an entire system out there, and there are people whose everyday job this is to make this work. But also on the recycling side, there is no such thing as a way, and there's just no such thing as actually throwing something away. It all goes somewhere.
So you mentioned, we've moved from trash just being everywhere in cities, there being huge health effects from it back in the 1800s and earlier. Trash pickup started with horse-drawn carts, which then left a lot of horse manure. We moved to trucks, which have now, produced air pollution as a byproduct, but we have visually no evidence that trash is there often in the morning except for litter. So in some respects, we've come a long way. What are the major litter and waste challenges for Philly and cities like it in 2018?
Talk all day on this.
That's a $64,000 question.
Are there, when you think about it, what are the ones that have the biggest consequences for citizens, whether they're up in their face on a day-to-day basis or it's just a long-term health of the environment?
Well, so one statistic that we throw out in the Zero Waste and Litter Action Plan is, so since the 1960s till today, we are putting out 3 times the amount of waste curbside that we did back then. And this disposable culture that we've created, I always bring this up, especially when I'm in a room with older people. I'm like, remember getting a TV back in the day? That was something you put on layaway. You saved up. It was this big deal. Now, they're so cheap, these electronics. We're just running through them so quickly and we don't know what to do with them. So we're just generating so much waste. Also, just the amount of plastic that is just all over our society right now. So I think the biggest thing is really kind of reevaluating how much waste we're generating and figuring out the ways, both from a personal standpoint, making your own decisions, but also from the market forces of the larger systems. So that's a big piece. Waste reduction is at the heart and center of this plan. But as we start looking through other things, again, we want to increase the ability and the outlets basically for recycling, finding new markets that we could bring here for products, making sure that things are made to be recycled and that you can use recycled materials back in that manufacturing, this idea of the circular economy. It's something that we look at a lot. We're looking to do a lot more with our food waste. Again, there's 2 sides to that coin, right? In another statistic is in the United States, 40% of all food is wasted from when it gets bought in the store to when it gets to your plate. So basically you go shopping and 40% of that food could feasibly go bad in the refrigerator, kind of just get wasted and get thrown out. That's an insane statistic, especially in a city like Philadelphia where there's so many people going hungry and a 25% poverty rate. So that's something we have to get better at. But even on top of that, how do we keep that food waste out of the landfill? And, those are the big challenges, and that's what we're trying to do with this plan is how do we stop using landfills? I know you said we came a long way, but the Romans used landfills, right? Ancient civilizations. This is not a new tech. This is pretty rudimentary. And it's man, we've done some incredible things in our society. To think that we still utilize this technology that's 3,000 years old is, obviously landfills are a lot more sophisticated than what the Romans were doing, but our waste stream has changed. So we have to be able to keep up. And then on just a day-to-day basis, aside from just thinking about how much waste you're putting curbside, it's also how you're putting it. We talk about litter. I've been on the back of a trash truck. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how people sometimes put their trash out with overflowing bags. They're untied. There's food waste everywhere. There's animals going through it. It's crazy. And again, it gets back to that taking for granted piece where we're at right now. I've been to countries that don't have waste management set up, and it's rough. It really looks, and to see sometimes places in Philly kind of look like those places, and we have waste management is just, it just doesn't make sense in that up.
And I don't want to say this is a unique challenge in Philadelphia, but I think one of the challenges that I've seen over the last few years doing this job is that we have amazing neighborhoods in Philadelphia, and every neighborhood has an amazing history and story, and they're all so different. So how do you effectively communicate and create long-term change in how people think about waste disposal patterns when neighborhoods are so different. And at this particular time in our history, when so many neighborhoods are changing in a whole lot of different ways. So, it's one of those things that you can go from the Northeast to the Southwest, and, how do you create from like a citywide standpoint, from city government, how do you create communication tools that work for every neighborhood?
So let me ask a question from the perspective of a cynical person. We might have cynical people who listen to the podcast. I like to think we don't. But what do you say to the cynical person who says, why don't we just find the cheapest way possible and can continue to play into, yes, we have a consumption culture, we're consuming and throwing away more than ever. Let's just get it out of here. Why are cities like Toronto, New York, and Philly taking it upon themselves to reduce the environmental impact? Is that just something that's naturally cropping up as a value of cities? Are there economic arguments that are being made as well to get us as far as we've come with this zero waste and litter agenda?
So environmental impacts aside, I'll go strictly to the economic issues because we face a lot of that, right? Like the cabinet has a big sustainability bent, but we're also extremely operational in economics. So when you think about, there's a term we call in the waste management business called long hauling. So basically it's how far are you going to haul waste away? And it is extremely not cost effective and inefficient to be hauling trash hundreds of miles away. I mean, our waste management, where we have our landfills and our waste to energy plants, where there is a process that we go through where we burn trash to create electricity, that we have right outside of the city of Philadelphia. They're within 20 miles of the city, and we have transfer stations to get out there. So there's a hard and fast economic thing to that. And then also, even with those initiatives set up or those infrastructure, we're running out of space in our landfills. And if we don't want to have to long haul, but we still want to use a landfill, it doesn't add up in this area, because in this metropolitan area now of 8 million people in the PA suburbs to the South Jersey suburbs, we just don't have space to build more landfills. We have to figure something else out. Waste to energy, people get really excited about that. So that's another thing. So a lot of times what I hear a lot from people are they always bring up Sweden. They're like, Sweden, they are burning their trash. They're like way more progressive than us. They do it. It's cleaner. It's much more environmentally friendly, which there is some truth to that. But there's a couple funny things with that. One is that Sweden actually was starting to have to import trash because they were relying on their energy for it, and they didn't have enough trash that they were producing. So you're almost a victim of your own success.
You mentioned how the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet came about. Does this exist in other cities?
Yeah, so a lot of cities around the country have zero waste goals, anywhere from the New Yorks, LA, San Francisco, Portland to Atlanta, Dallas. So it's really exciting that this is happening. And my belief is that once you have more than 51% of the U.S. population living in places with zero waste goals, market forces are going to have to respond in a much more meaningful way than they are now. I will, I'm not trying to call people out, but I will say around the waste issue, there's a lot of greenwashing out there. There's a lot of misinformation, people being, that's recyclable. And you just say, oh, that's good. That's recyclable. I'll just keep wasting it because it's in actuality, it's not being recycled. There's a lot of complex, nuances to the system. So I think what makes Philadelphia very unique is that not just that we have our zero waste goal, but we've coupled litter with it, that we're actually looking at the larger waste stream in general, and that it lives in a place like the managing director's office that kind of brings all of these different entities together. A lot of other places in other cities, it's their sanitation department that's dealing with the zero waste goal, or maybe like nonprofits, things like that. Whereas here, it's the kind of, the managing director's office basically acts as like the chief operating office of the city of Philadelphia. So to be able to kind of have it housed there, be looking at this like whole systemic thing of the issue, I think is very unique, the way we structured it, and it makes the job really interesting.
Yeah, talk about these. I was looking at the subcommittees and the dimensions that you're approaching the problem from. Can you talk a little bit about each of those subcommittees, and then if there's one that really excites you, or a couple that are really exciting you right now, love to dig into some of the work that's happening there too.
Sure. So we have 5 different subcommittees that meet every month. They're working meetings, and they push all the work forward. So we have the Waste Reduction and Diversion Subcommittee that's looking at all of our zero waste goals. How can we improve? How can we bring composting to the city? How do we do building audits through our municipal and commercial buildings? We have a Litter Enforcement and Cleaner Public Spaces Subcommittee. So that's the enforcement side of things. How do we set up the regulations? How do we set up the systems? What policy do we need to clean the city up? We have data, which is responsible for the litter index, among some other data processing. They basically are data staff from all the different departments that are involved in the cabinet. We had 6 different, and again, other cities do something similar to the litter index. I think where we're unique in Philadelphia is we didn't just do our streets. We did vacant lots, waterways, rail stations, schools, parks. It was very comprehensive.
How did you collect the data for that? So this is mapped block by block, street by street. How granular does it get? Does it get down to lot by lot?
Lot by lot, yeah.
Wow.
We had 37 staff collect 42,000 data points on over 42,000 on devices basically that we had to survey using ArcGIS. So it's all GIS enabled. We have this incredible data processing system at our Office of Innovation Technology that created this comprehensive system. Then we have the behavioral science subcommittee, which again plays into that. So we have a really incredible initiative in Philadelphia called GovLab PHL, which is basically like the design lab for how we do city government. It's out of our policy office, and they paired us up with behavioral scientists from area universities to run behavioral experiments. And taking everything we just said, everything kind of gets filtered into the communications and engagement subcommittee to say, okay, here's all of these things we're doing. How do we message it to the public? How do we engage them? Michelle sits on almost all of those subcommittees, so I was going to turn it over to her. What's your favorite subcommittee and why?
So Keep Philadelphia Beautiful sits on the full cabinet, but also has been active with the behavioral science and the community education and communication subcommittee. And I think for different reasons, they're both very, very exciting. So in terms of the communications subcommittee, it's really interesting to figure out sort of that messaging piece that we were talking about before, that puzzle of how do you put out citywide messaging that's effective, and how do you do that in sort of that leveraging your partnerships, leveraging all of the different departments that are involved in this. And it's this really interesting nut to crack. And I also I'm really excited by all of the different civic engagement pieces that are involved with that. So the rebranding of the Recycling Rewards program, now called PhilaCycle, and that has, that sort of regular recycling rewards incentive program has been enhanced pretty rapidly to try and get folks involved at higher and higher levels. So that's really exciting. And then the Behavioral Science Committee, I think, the idea that we can do some behavioral science work and have that guide policy and initiatives, and doing that in sort of a data-driven way and thinking long-term, how do we not just change behavior in this generation, but how do we keep passing that along? How do we have kids teach their parents and, parents teach their kids? That's really exciting. And I think some of the specific experiments that have already been conducted are fascinating. And I also think, going back to the question of how unique is this, I was lucky enough this past year at Keep America Beautiful's annual conference to be able to give a presentation talking about the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet and Keep Philadelphia Beautiful's role in this work. And it just got a really positive response I had, people coming up to me afterwards all throughout the rest of the conference. What is going on? How are you doing this? How is this happening? And even a couple of follow-up emails about it too. Can you send me the plan? I know you gave me the, the printout version. Can I get a digital one? And specifically the litter index. I had multiple people talk about how, in their cities, they'd been pushing their municipal governments to do something like what we did in Philadelphia, and they just couldn't. They just weren't able to sort of push it through yet, and they were hoping that that sort of this evidence from Philadelphia might help them to make the case. So that was really exciting.
So what do you think it's going to take to reach that 2035 goal? So doing some quick math, 17 years.
Oh, no. 17
right?
years.
So 17 years, and it sounds like at some point you had mentioned it really is going to take a sea change. Some of this is baked into our consumption habits, right? And that there's a lot that can be done and is being done in really innovative ways in terms of the way that we produce waste, curb waste. How can we influence those behaviors through education? What do you see the role of local businesses and national businesses in helping to change that tide and get you to 2035?
Yeah, I think that as the tide starts to change, more people kind of get onto these goals. Cities are showing gains, and the market forces do change. things are going to have to change with it. But on the local level, I mean, things that we are trying to do are really excited about. In the next coming year, we are going to be taking what's currently called our commercial recycling plans that every business by law is required to fill out. We don't have the greatest participation rate on that right now, but now that we're bringing all of these resources to the cabinet, we're actually expanding it to a waste audit. So it's not just about recycling, but it's like, how are you reusing? How are you reducing? What are all the actions you're taking to get rid of all of these different materials, not just single stream recycling? So we launched it, and again, a big part of this, and this is a big lead from the managing director and the mayor, is if we're going to be telling businesses what they need to do, we need to lead by example and do it first. So we have 471 of our municipal buildings that we've identified that are city staffed and city owned, and we have done municipal building audits in all of those for waste, and it's been an incredible process, just really uncovering who needs this contract, who needs this education, who needs these dots connected, in the bigger part of the cabinet to really figure out how they can better their waste management practices. So we're looking to replicate that same process, take the commercial recycling plans and then turn it into a commercial waste audit plan. So through that, that'll be a by law program that people have to do, but we're also going to be coupling it with an incentive program through we're calling it the Zero Waste Business Partnership Program that we're in the process of developing right now that will generate all different kinds of incentives, from tax incentives to anything with how people interact with city government, even to the sheer marketing that they're a zero waste business, to kind of get people to start moving towards zero waste as well. So it's there, there's that kind of the carrot out there to kind of get people to want to start moving forward as we kind of lay behind that the tracks of the infrastructure and the way that people are this is just how people are going to do business in the future, about reducing waste and making sure that it's staying out the landfill. So we're really excited about where that's going to lead by 2035. It's it's going to be an uphill battle, but I think that what kind of keeps us going every day, Michelle and I talk about this a lot, is the forward progress keeps going, and we have a plan, and that's the biggest thing. This isn't some nebulous there's a few ideas that people put up, hasn't really been adopted, and it's kind of like we're just going towards where there's political will and where people want to do it. I mean, there is a certain aspect of we need buy-in, and we need people. What are people interested in? As part of community organizing, right? I said this is a community organizing job. Where do we see buy-in? Where do we want people to go? But that we have this plan. If we can do the entire plan and just keep moving forward with it. And luckily, I work for really incredible, forward-thinking, visionary leaders in our city who feel the same way. And this isn't, it's just something that we're kind of just, let's figure this out and we'll do piecemeal. Let's have this whole comprehensive plan. Let's have it data-driven. Let's have a community buy-in, and let's move forward. And that's what we're doing.
And I think the really fascinating thing about sort of the business end of it and the producer end is where technology is going to take us in 17 years. And that's something that we can't predict, obviously, but what are products going to look like in 17 years? What are the materials going to be? What are we going to be able to process at recycling plants that we weren't able to? And that's sort of a big but kind of exciting question mark out there.
Nick and Michelle, thanks so much for joining me on the show here. This has been great. We'll make sure to share that plan. That's a public plan, right? We can share that on the website? Mm-hmm. Perfect. We'll make sure that that's out there. We'll also connect with Keep Philadelphia Beautiful site. For listeners in Philly, is there a site that they can go to get involved, or a place that has...
We have a site.
Yeah, cleanphl.org.
If you're living
One-stop shop.
One-stop shop, which actually came from Michelle's litter convenings. So through Keep Philadelphia Beautiful, we had people say, we don't want to go to 5 city websites to find out 5 different things about litter. We wanted one website. It has all that on there. You asked about people getting involved in cleanups. We have a whole FAQ on how you do a community cleanup from start to finish. And you could also go on there if you live in Philly and search your address. And when you search your address, you'll get your block litter score, your neighborhood litter score, and a whole list of the civic engagement that you can get involved in to keep your city clean and how to get involved. If you're not from Philadelphia, there's plenty of documents on there that hopefully can inspire you to do something like this in your municipality, in your city. But also we have things like compost one-pagers and zero waste tips on how you can live more of a zero waste lifestyle, all different kinds of things that we hope are really great resources that people can use.
And if you go to the materials and templates section, there's a great infographic of what you can and can't recycle in the city. So I personally refer people to that all the time. And
could I grab that and put that in the show post, do you think, or would I have to get some clearance? Or
no, it's all there. Source. You can print it out. You can whatever.
I want to give a shout out to Philadelphia, as we are like the open source city. Our open data Philly is incredible. Our websites, this is all That's one of the perks of living or working for city government. Just like take it. Like we produce this, we put it on the website. This is for you or use. So go for it.
This is you. Your tax dollars paid for it, and
Exactly.
now it's
Everybody
coming back to you.
The Commonwealth.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. It's apparent you've thought about this before.
You think?
And thanks for taking more time out of your busy schedules to come by and chat with us about this.
It's our pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks once again to Nick Esposito and Michelle Feldman for taking the time to record that interview. If you live in Philly and you want to get involved, or live somewhere else and want to see what the litter index we talked about looks like, visit cleanphl.org. I'll link to it in the show notes. If you like the show, as always, please leave a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher. And in the meantime, thanks for listening and for being an above-average citizen.